The whiteout was absolute. It wasn't just snow. It was a wall of ice erasing the world. Lena screamed as her steering wheel locked, the sedan spinning violently off the icy road and plunging into the ravine. The impact was deafening, followed by a silence so heavy it felt like a weight on her chest. The cold was instant. It bit through her coat, freezing her tears on her cheeks. She closed her eyes, accepting that no one would find her in this hell. Then a sound cut through the wind, a heavy thud, then another. A shadow loomed over the shattered windshield, hoarse, massive, and dark. And a man wrapped in shearling and snow, looking down at her like a guardian spirit of the mountain. The dashboard clock flickered and died, plunging the car into darkness. Alina gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white against the leather. She should have listened to the warning signs back at the gas station. The old man had told her the pass was closing, but she didn't listen. She never listened when there was a deadline to meet in Chicago. The blueprints for the Meridian Tower were due on Monday morning. She had taken the scenic route through Wyoming to clear her head. Now the scenery was trying to kill her. The wind howled outside, shaking the frame of her luxury sedan. It sounded like a living thing, angry and hungry for warmth. She tried to open the door, but the snow was already drifted too high. Her breath came in short, panicked clouds of white vapor. The heater had stopped working 10 minutes ago. Cold was creeping up her legs, numbing her toes inside her boots. She checked her phone for the 100th time, but the screen remained blank. No service blinked back at her, a digital mockery of her situation. She was the lead architect at the most prestigious firm in the Midwest. She controlled steel, glass, and concrete with a wave of her hand. But here, in the wild heart of the Teton Mountains, she was nothing. She was just a fragile heartbeat waiting to be extinguished by the frost. Her eyelids felt heavy, heavier than they ever had after a double shift. People said falling asleep in the freezing cold was peaceful. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt like giving up, like losing the fight. She rested her head against the frozen window, watching the white swirl. Suddenly, a shape darker than the night blocked the wind. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, a trick of the dying mind. But then she heard the unmistakable snort of a large animal. There was a heavy thud against the metal of her door. A light beam cut through the swirling snow, blindingly bright. She shielded her eyes, her heart hammering a painful rhythm against her ribs. The door was wrenched open with a groan of protesting metal. The wind rushed in, instantly stealing the last of the cabin's heat. A hand, gloved in thick leather, reached in and grabbed her shoulder. "Can you move?" The voice was deep, rough like gravel grinding together. She tried to speak, but her jaw was frozen, her teeth chattering violently. She just nodded weakly, though she wasn't sure if she could feel her legs. The man didn't wait for an answer. He unbuckled her belt. He pulled her out of the car as if she weighed nothing at all. The wind hit her full force, stealing the breath from her lungs. He wrapped a heavy wool blanket around her, smelling of wood smoke and horses. "Hold on to me," he commanded, lifting her up toward the saddle. She grasped at his coat, burying her face into the rough fabric. He mounted behind her, his body a solid wall of heat against her back. The horse moved forward, trudging through snow that was knee-deep. The journey was a blur of cold wind and the rhythmic gait of the horse. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, focused only on his warmth. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back. It was slow, calm, completely unbothered by the fury of the storm. Eventually, a warm yellow glow appeared in the distance. It was a cabin, small but sturdy, smoke pouring from a stone chimney. The man dismounted and carried her up the wooden steps. He kicked the door open, and the rush of warm air was like a physical blow. He set her down on a soft leather sofa near a roaring fireplace. She couldn't stop shivering, her body shaking uncontrollably as the blood returned. He moved efficiently, stripping off his heavy coat and hat. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair plastered to his forehead. He knelt before her, pulling off her frozen boots with gentle hands. "My name is Silas," he said, not looking up, focused on her feet. "Alina," she managed to whisper, her voice cracking. He nodded once, stood up, and went to the kitchen without another word. He returned with a mug of steaming broth and pressed it into her hands. "Drink slowly. Don't burn yourself." She obeyed, the hot liquid spreading life through her frozen chest. He sat in the armchair opposite her, watching her with intense blue eyes. He didn't ask why she was on the pass during a blizzard. He didn't ask what she did for a living or where she was going. He just watched her to make sure she wasn't going into shock. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the crackling fire. In Chicago, silence was something to be feared, something to be filled. Here, the silence felt heavy, ancient, and strangely comforting. Alina looked around the cabin. It was simple, rustic, and clean. No television, no computer. Just books, tools, and the fire. "The storm will last 3 days," Silas said, looking at the window. 3 days? I have to get back. My work. Alina started to panic. "The road is buried under 6 feet of snow. You aren't going anywhere." His tone wasn't mean. It was just a statement of undeniable fact. Alina slumped back against the cushions, the fight draining out of her. She was trapped in a stranger's cabin in the middle of nowhere. But as she looked at Silas, seeing the firelight dance on his face, she realized she felt safer here than she ever had in her penthouse. The next morning, Alina woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. She was covered in a heavy quilt, the fire still burning low. She sat up, her body aching, but the deep chill was gone. Silas was already up, wearing a flannel shirt, staring out the window. "Storm's worse," he said without turning around. Alina got up, wrapping the quilt around her shoulders like a cape. She stood next to him, looking out at the white oblivion. You couldn't see the barn, you couldn't see the trees, just white. "Do you live here all alone?" she asked softly. "It's peaceful," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "Don't you get lonely?" He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Only when I go to town." Over the next 2 days, time seemed to dissolve. Alina, who lived her life by calendar alerts, lost track of the hours. She watched Silas work inside the cabin mending leather tack. His hands were scarred and rough, but his movements were precise.
Chiffante, sketch pad in her bag, and started to draw. Not buildings, not skyscrapers, but the curve of the fireplace. She drew the rough texture of the wooden beams overhead. She drew Silas when he wasn't looking, capturing the set of his jaw. "You're an artist," Silas said on the second evening, looking over her shoulder. Alina jumped. She hadn't heard him approach. "I'm an architect. I design boxes for people to work in." "This looks like more than a box," he said, pointing to her sketch. "Or used to love drawing," she admitted, looking at the charcoal lines. "But then it became about budgets and zoning laws and client demands. Seems like a waste to let the world ruin something you love," Silas said. He walked back to the fire and threw another log on. Stuck on it. Stuck with her, it rattled around in her brain. He was right. She had built her career, but she had lost her art. They ate dinner by the fire, simple stew that tasted better than fancy cuisine. They talked about the ranch, his horses, the history of the valley. Silas told her about his grandfather who built this cabin by hand. He spoke with a quiet passion about the land, about protecting it. Alina found herself captivated, not just by his words, but by him. The city men she dated were polished, loud, and constantly checking their phones. Silas was like the mountain, solid, unmoving, and deeply present. On the third night, the wind finally stopped howling. The silence that followed was profound, ringing in their ears. They stood on the porch, the moon illuminating the fresh snow. 2. Elena whispered, her breath misting in the air. Yeah, Silas said, his voice low. Plows will be through by noon tomorrow. A sudden sadness washed over her, sharp and unexpected. She didn't want to leave. The thought terrified her. Shot up at him, and he was already looking at her. There was a tension in the air, electric and thick. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to brush a snowflake from her hair. His fingers lingered on her cheek, rough skin against her softness. Elena leaned into his touch, her heart racing faster than the storm. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to ask her to stay. Silas leaned in, his eyes searching hers, his breath warm on her face. But then he pulled back, his hand dropping to his side. You belong in the city, Elena. You have big things to build. The rejection was gentle, but it cut deeper than the cold. He turned and went back inside, leaving her alone with the moon. She realized then that he was protecting his heart, not hers. The next morning, the sound of a diesel engine broke the peace. The county plow roared down the road, clearing the path to civilization. Silas drove her to the nearest town where a rental car waited. The drive was silent. The easy conversation of the cabin was gone. He unloaded her bag and stood by the driver's side door. "Take care of yourself, Elena," he said, tipping his hat. "Thank you, Silas, for saving my life. Just doing what needed doing." She wanted to scream. She wanted to shake him. But she just nodded, got in the car, and drove away. She watched him in the rearview mirror until he was just a speck. Then he was gone, and the tears finally came. Act 5 begins in the noise of Chicago, 3 months later. The Meridian Tower project was finished. The launch party was tonight. Elena stood in her glass office, looking out at the city lights. It was beautiful. It was impressive. It was completely empty. Her boss, Julian, walked in with a bottle of champagne. "We did it, Elena. Partner track. You're going to run this place." He poured a glass and handed it to her, smiling his polished smile. "To the skyline," he toasted. "To the skyline," she repeated, but the champagne tasted flat. All she could hear was the hum of the air conditioning. It was a constant, artificial noise that never stopped. She missed the crackle of the fire. She missed the wind. She walked over to her drafting table in the corner. Underneath the blueprints for a new mall, there was a sketch. It was a drawing of a man on a horse, fighting a blizzard. She traced the lines of Silas's face with her finger. "Julian," she said, turning around. "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "The next project." "You need a vacation." "No. I mean, I can't do this life. I quit." Julian laughed, thinking it was a joke. Very funny. "Drink your wine."
I'm serious.
"I'm resigning." Effective immediately. She set the glass down on the desk, unzipped. She grabbed her coat and the sketch. That was all she took. She walked out of the skyscraper and didn't look back. The drive back to Wyoming took 2 days. It wasn't winter anymore. The world was green and alive. Wildflowers covered the valleys where the snow had been deep. The air grew cleaner and sweeter with every mile she drove. As she turned onto the dirt road leading to the ranch, her heart was pounding harder than it had during the crash. What if he didn't want her? What if he had forgotten? She crested the hill and saw the cabin. Smoke was rising from the chimney, even in the spring air. And there he was. Silas. He was fixing a fence near the barn. He stopped working when he heard the car approaching. He took off his hat, wiping his brow, squinting at the vehicle. Elena stopped the car and stepped out. She wasn't wearing her designer boots. She wore jeans and work boots. Silas dropped the hammer he was holding. He walked toward her slowly at first, then faster. "You're back," he said, stopping a few feet away. "I forgot something," Elena said, her voice trembling. "What did you forget?" "My heart. A thing I left it by your fireplace." Silas didn't hesitate this time. He closed the distance and pulled her into his arms. He lifted her off her feet, burying his face in her neck. "I thought I'd never see you again," he groaned. "You were wrong," she whispered into his shoulder. "I realized I don't want to build boxes anymore." "What do you want to build?" he asked, looking into her eyes. "I want to build a life. Here. With you." Kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of promise and forever. The horses watched from the paddock, swishing their tails. The mountains stood silent and approving in the background. Elena was finally home. Oh, the years that followed were not easy, but they were real. Elena designed a new barn, the most beautiful in the county. She learned to ride, to mend fences, and to listen to the wind. And every winter, when the snowstorms came rolling in, she and Silas would sit by the fire, safe and warm. He would hold her hand, his rough fingers interlaced with hers. They would listen to the wind howl outside, powerless to hurt them, because the cold could never touch the fire they had built together. They were no longer the architect and the rancher. They were just two souls who found each other in the whiteout, and in the vast, wild silence of Wyoming, ... They found everything they ever needed.